have presented the situations of positive and negative interdependence in separate sections. This has certainly given you the impression of a dichotomous reality, that is, a very clear reality where there is a way to classify the situations we encounter into one category or the other, and thus easily determine which type of situation, the distributive or the integrative one, we are facing. Unfortunately, or fortunately, nothing is farther from the truth. There is hardly any context that we can describe purely and solely as negative interdependence. Even in the most competitive situation, it is very rare that all parties' objectives are in direct and fundamental opposition. Some objectives will undoubtedly be, but in reality, parties are often motivated by multiple factors during conflicts, and there is often a possible margin for cooperation, however small it may be. Conversely, there is hardly any situation that can be described as purely positive in terms of interdependence. That is, no situation that is based solely and simply on cooperation without any element of competition coming into play. Even in the most positive discussions, such as when we are discussing our next holiday's destination, and in the most positive relationships, such as when we are talking to our loved ones, our goals are not completely and directly aligned to that of the others. If this were the case, in fact, no discussions would be necessary and conflicts would not take place. The reality is that the situations of positive and negative interdependence that I have presented to you should only be understood as theoretical poles. Such theoretical poles are necessary because they help us to better understand and analyze the conflict situation we encounter. But as theoretical poles, they only remotely correspond to reality. Most of the situations we encounter in everyday life are somewhere on a continuum between these two poles. Sometimes you will find yourself more on the negative side of interdependence, exhibiting more competitive than cooperative behaviors, and opting for distributive strategies. But even in this situation, you should keep in mind that cooperation may be possible at times, and that integrative strategies may be useful. Conversely, when facing situations that you interpret as positive interdependence, remember that cooperation quickly turns into competition, that the goals you are pursuing are not necessarily exactly the same as those pursued by your partner, and that at certain points in the discussion, you will need to be more assertive and to use more distributive strategies. In short, every discussion and even every divergence has its share of competition and its share of cooperations. Sometimes we are more on the competitive side of the continuum, sometimes we are more on the cooperative side. But in all cases, competition and cooperation coexist. For this reason, we will frequently refer to conflictual discussions as mixed motive situations. There is always a minimum of cooperation because the mere fact of agreeing to discuss implies that the parties have to adjust. Similarly, there is always a minimum of competition because the interests and objectives of the parties are never completely aligned. The students I teach my negotiation class often have a hard time integrating the idea of mixed motives and the continuum of interdependence. Very often, when I ask them to analyze a situation, they jump to the interpretation that seems most obvious to them. And they tell me that they are either dealing with a distributive or with an integrative negotiation or situation of conflict. This is difficult, And this difficulty is linked to our propensity to think in simplified terms and to reduce reality to basic and fundamental categories. This type of dichotomous thinking prevents students from devising solutions to divergence that are outside of the box. Solutions that are ultimately more optimal because they consider the subtler nuance involved in conflictual situations. The real question divergent parties should ask is how much cooperative and competitive leeway they have. Should they seek to meet mutual interests of them all? Or on the contrary, should they focus their attention on personal gain? Is the search for personal profit the most optimal solution? Or would individuals have a greater interest in earning less in the short term in order to preserve their relationship in the long run? All of these questions will encourage more nuanced interpretations and a better understanding of the reality of conflictual situations.